Good afternoon, everyone. Before we get things underway for this afternoon's application tips webinar here from Oxford Said, I'd just like to check that you can hear me. So if anyone would be kind enough to type into the question box, thank you, Samantha, straight there. Yes, they can hear. So I will proceed. Without further ado then, good afternoon from Oxford, maybe good morning to wherever you are, maybe good evening, maybe middle of the night, in which case we'll try not to keep you from your bed too much longer. My name's Charlotte and in the next hour or so, we're going to be touching upon some application tips for you. I guess that you're possibly on different points of the journey towards submitting your Oxford MBA application. For some people, it might be something you're starting to consider. And for others listening, I'm sure you are shaping up ready to hit submit in good time to meet this Friday's application deadline. So as I've said, my name's Charlotte Kelshiker. I'm one of the senior advisors here at Oxford Said in the recruitment and admissions team, and I'm joined this afternoon by two colleagues, Mandeep Mahal and Gisela Collins, who will be sitting beside me, keeping me on track and stopping me from waffling on too much, as is my wont, and will be helping answer questions towards the end of our time together. What I would say is that feel free to type in questions as the thought enters your head this afternoon, but I won't speak to any of those questions until I've got through the slide deck. And it could be that by the time we've got through the material, your question's been answered, in which case that's great, but we will save time towards the end to answer any questions that's appropriate for the audience to hear the answer to this afternoon. And I would say in terms of questions, let's not try and get into too much niche personal territory. Let's keep this nice and broad based with questions so that hopefully many members of the audience will find the response helpful. So without further ado, let's take you to Oxford. And when you think about Oxford, when you think about the university, this is probably what you have in mind. I think the Victorian poet Matthew Arnold christened it the city of dreaming spires, and there's a few in this picture. A nice modern addition to the city skyline in the distance there. I think that might be part of engineering science. But generally, when you think about Oxford, this is what you think about. You think about the medieval heart of the city, you think about the college system, you think about the Bodleian Library, the Sheldonian Theatre, you think about the Radcliffe Camera, which you can see forefront of this shot. And of course, as an MBA student here at Oxford Said, it's important to remember that you're not just applying to business school. You're applying to do an MBA at a business school that's an academic department within one of the greatest universities in the world. And of course, as an MBA student, not only will you be taught at the business school, but you'd also be able to be a member of a college. And that will see you join a community in a building potentially like this, though not All Souls, I have to say, the college that's sitting there on the right of the screen, but many other colleges that look very similar, that are scattered around the heart of the city. And college membership really confers an extra dimension to your experience here at Oxford, where you get to spend time with students who are studying all kinds of fascinating subjects, people from all over the world, many, many walks of life, many different academic specialisms, literally from archaeology to zoology and everything in between. So when you think about Oxford, this is what you think about, these grand ancient buildings. But bringing you up to date, here's the school. So this is what you need to picture yourself walking into if you are admitted to the MBA programme here at Oxford Said. The main building of the business school was opened in 2001. In fact, we didn't admit our first MBA students at Oxford until 1996, so we are an incredibly young business school, albeit part of a very ancient institution. So your lessons, your classes, your lectures, possibly your tutorials, your project team work will all unfold in this building. So really modern, really conveniently situated right beside the main railway station here at Oxford. So if you are zipping up and down to London, networking events or job interviews or whatever it might be, super conveniently located and very modern, very comfortable. So this is where you could picture yourself walking in perhaps next September, when the next MBA cohort starts. I'm sure most of you listening this afternoon have already done quite a lot of research into the programme. You already understand a little bit about the core curriculum, the way that we structure the course. Maybe you understand about the different elective options and perhaps some of the applied learning projects and challenges and competitions and scenarios that we get you to undertake during a real action-packed one-year programme. But let's get under the skin of what the class looks like. So this slide here has recently been updated to reflect the profile of the class that's just started, just last month. So here we are sort of midway into what we call Michaelmas term. Here at Oxford, we welcomed a class of 329 students to the school, 64 nationalities. I think we had at least 2 or 3 countries where we'd never had a student from that particular country before, and we have flags on our common room wall of every country that's represented in the class, and every year we have to commission some new flags. I think this year, perhaps, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm thinking Liberia, Namibia and Haiti are certainly some new countries that spring to mind. Yes, I'm getting some nods here from around the table. So in other words, we are an incredibly diverse programme in terms of where we draw our students from. We're 95% international, so you certainly won't find yourself in a class that's full of British students. Having said that, plenty of British people apply here and come and undertake the programme. But really what we're trying to communicate here is the diversity, the rich mix of our class, which really represents what the world is like, the world of work that you find yourself in when you go back to that, perhaps after completing your MBA here at Oxford. It is very diverse, it is very mixed. It will be populated by people from many different walks of life, different academic backgrounds, different professional backgrounds, established economies, emerging economies. And really what you find here in the class is almost like a micro version of that global reality. Something that we're particularly proud of this year is celebrating 44% of our class comprise female students. But what would be, I think, even more exciting is maybe one year we wouldn't even have to touch upon that statistic at all. It wouldn't be a thing that we need to talk about when we really have achieved proper gender parity in the MBA class. In terms of work experience, people normally come to do an MBA when they're about 5 or 6 years into their chosen career, normally thinking about perhaps taking another step on the ladder to accelerate their career, staying in the same sector, maybe heading on the next step towards ultimately perhaps a C-suite type role, or maybe looking to pivot career entirely, moving from one role to another, moving sector, maybe moving geography. Maybe you're working on one side of the planet at the moment, and after your MBA, you're hoping to be working on the other. And also for those of you who are stat fans out there wondering how your standardised test score measures up against the class median, well, we're sitting around the 690 mark at the moment. And for those of you who are thinking, yeah, but I took the GRE, how does that compare? That would compare very, very broadly to about 160, 160. So verbal and quant components, they're around the 160 mark on average. Now, for those of you who have been doing your homework already and doing your research, thinking about getting your application together, you will know that we accept applications under stage deadlines. These are, if you like, gathered fields, for want of a better expression. And what that means is that we open up our online application system every August, and applications come in and they're received, and those that are complete when a deadline passes will be gathered together and assessed by the admissions committee, and we will decide whether we want to shortlist you for interview or not. But the long and the short is that your application must be complete when one of these deadlines falls. So as you can see here, 6th of September, stage 1, that's done and dusted. In fact, we've just made a bunch of offers just a couple of weeks ago to our stage 1 admits. So we've got lots of people out there already excitedly planning the next step on their journey towards Oxford. And our stage 2 application deadline falls on Friday this week. Now, the application deadline falls on the Friday, and yes, it falls at the end of day, but as we will discover on the coming slides, your application does need to be complete, which means certain mandatory items need to be there present, need to be submitted, tasks need to be undertaken, and I'm going to unpack that in a little bit more detail for you on the next couple of slides. But just in case anyone was considering, should I apply in stage 2? I've got 4 days, rush, 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 get that done and dusted. Or should I perhaps wait until stage 3? I think one of the takeaway messages from today is that you should really apply when you feel that your application is in great shape. In other words, you can be satisfied that you've done as good a job as you can in putting your application together. Your post-MBA plans, let's say, for example, are well thought through and you've articulated that well. The video assignments, the essays you've written, you've made a good job of that. Your standardized test score you feel is a reasonable performance, that even if you retook, you probably wouldn't be able to improve it that much. We really are looking for you to apply when you feel confident about your application. I know it's always nerve-wracking to apply, but feel that you are giving it your best shot. Because you can only apply once in any admissions cycle, and by that I mean if you're rejected in stage 1, you can't reapply in stage 2 or stage 3. You have to wait for the brand new admission cycle to open the following August. So given that you can only do it once a year, when you do decide to apply, you really want to give it your best shot. In terms of your likelihood of admissions, I would say that broadly speaking, your chances are going to be the same, whether you apply in stage 1, 2, or 3. So whether you hit that September, November, or January deadline, your chance of being invited for interview and subsequently your chance of potentially receiving an offer of admission to the programme is broadly the same. Word of warning about stage 4. Everyone's very welcome to apply in stage 4 if that suits you and your schedule best. But it just comes with a little bit of a caveat, a little bit of a warning, and that is that we are very likely to be running a wait list by the time stage 4 rolls around. That's certainly been the case for the last few years. And of course, if we do really like you and want to make an offer to you, but you're on the wait list, we can't make you an offer unless someone else drops out. And what if they don't drop out? It means we can't make any offers to any of our great waitlist people. So if you do feel that you're in good shape to apply and you could, for example, hit that January deadline, go for the January deadline, because stage 4 is, albeit open and welcome, you are just taking a little bit more of a gamble. So if you are risk averse, then I would say stage 2 or stage 3 is your friend. Right, so what I intend to do on this slide here is to just visit some of the aspects of your application that need to be completed, that are mandatory, and just talk through, I guess, the kind of materials you might need to gather together and generally what we are looking for from a candidate. So unsurprisingly, you need an undergraduate degree. And unsurprisingly, because you are applying to Oxford, you need to have done fairly well. You don't need to have a first-class honours degree, but you do need, I would say, an upper second class or perhaps the international equivalent of that. We really aren't bothered, though, what subject you read at undergrad. The class that we have here, as well as being diverse in terms of people's international backgrounds and experience and professional background, it's also super diverse on an academic basis as well. People are welcomed to the class who have studied everything from music to medicine in their undergraduate degree, but the one thing they're likely to have in common is that they did pretty well. So to support your undergraduate degree information, we would ask you to upload your full degree transcripts as part of your application. And by transcripts, I really mean your mark sheets. So the document that you received from your university that breaks down everything you studied during your degree and shows us how you performed for each of those modules or topics or subjects, as well as showing us your final overarching degree classification. Don't worry about obtaining some kind of equivalence statement when you apply. If you didn't study in the UK, that's absolutely fine. Our admissions team are very experienced when it comes to calculating international equivalence, and really it is part of our due diligence when we receive your application to compare your degree result to the UK system to make a very informed equivalence statement for the admissions committee. So when you're completing the application, you may find that your undergraduate degree, it wasn't awarded with a classification like first class or lower second class honours. It might be a letter of the alphabet, it might be a Greek letter, it might be a percentage. So you may be, you know, B plus or 88% or 3,350 out of 4,000. Just express it in your application form the way that you've read it from your transcript, and we will see what you got, where you got it from, we'll understand what country you were educated in, and we will make that equivalence calculation for you as part of processing your application. But getting hold of your transcript is important. We're quite happy for you to just scan and upload your unofficial transcript at application stage. And if all you have is access to perhaps an online self-service portal from your university that shows us all of your scores, again, a screenshot of something like that will suffice at application stage. It's really only if we invite you to interview that we'll then start to talk to you about your official transcripts. So moving on to your standardized test score, you do need either a GMAT or GRE score when you apply. You absolutely need to have already taken the test. You already need to be in possession of your unofficial test results. Now, if you take a GMAT, you get that the day that you take the test. For the GRE, though, you normally get access to your provisional results 10 days, maybe 2 weeks later. So factor that in to your timeline when you are working back from one of our application deadlines, because not only do we need you to type in your scores, but we do need you to upload your copy of your score report. We also need you to have registered Side Business School, University of Oxford, as one of the institutions that you would like to have access to your official scores. What happens is when we're processing your application, we'll look at your score report, we will log into either Pearson VUE or ETS, depending on which test you took, and we will verify your scores online. And we can't do that without your score report. So even though you might have made that available to us, you still need to upload your copy. Without it, we can't verify your marks. So that is an important part of the application. And in terms of the kind of score that we look for, as I mentioned earlier, well, the class median is 690, but that doesn't mean that, you know, you might be sitting there thinking, but I've only got 650. Does that mean I can't apply? Absolutely not. Of course, you can still apply. This is just but one data point with regards to your overall profile. Now, clearly, you might have taken a GMAT or GRE and been pretty disappointed with your scores. Maybe it hasn't turned out in reality to be anything like as good as the mock papers that you sat. In that case, that is time to have a conversation with yourself and say, look, if I retake and if I'm pretty targeted about my revision and can be quite tactical about that and maybe focus in on a component where you know you could do better, are you likely to raise your test results? And if the honest answer to that is, well, yes, our recommendation would always be, well, just go for it again. From our perspective, we would never think ill of you if we can see that you have 2 or more test attempts. It really doesn't bother us. We are just looking to see a nice balanced scorecard. So we'd like to see, for example, the fact that you haven't got a super strong score in verbal, but your quant is, you know, I don't know, 10th percentile. We want to see something fairly balanced. In terms of admitting students to the class, we are likely to see a range, certainly in the GMAT, a range of sort of 600 through to 790. And that's why, you know, the mass, it's likely to, I guess, if you think about the bell curve, it's likely to be sitting with a rump around that 690 point. But of course, there are always going to be outliers at the upper end of the scale and at the lower end of the scale. But really, if your score is perhaps, let's say, under 600, and you really know that you could do better if you take the test again, then we would always encourage you to do that, because we certainly won't think any less of you for having attempted the test a second time. And for those of you who are yet to take a standardized test, you might be thinking, I don't know whether to take a GRE or a GMAT. What do you really prefer? Well, honestly, we don't mind. We would say, do your research, look into both tests. You may find that one suits you better than the other. We certainly have a GMAT simulator available on our website at the moment. So there are a lot of great resources out there that are free that we will share with you to help you practice and prepare to take one of these tests. And like I say, it's the GMAT that we have the simulator available for, but that isn't to say that we prefer that test over the GRE, far from it. It really is what feels better for you. Next thing I'm going to stop off at here on this page is video assessment, and then rather annoyingly I'm going to move on because there's a separate slide that just speaks to that in a little more detail next. So I'm going to head on down to English proficiency. Okay, so we are a very international class, as you know, from what I was saying earlier. So a number of our students will have to submit the results of an English language proficiency test when they apply. I'm not going to go into deep detail in terms of the granularity of test scores that you need to achieve here and now, because that information is available in great detail in both our online prospectus and on our website. So head on over to our website, download a brochure, look at our FAQs, because we unpack this guidance in some detail there for you also. But suffice to say that if you have not done a degree that was taught entirely in English, either by virtue of it being taught in a majority English-speaking country, or by virtue of it being taught in a non-English majority-speaking country, but it was taught in English, then you will need to submit the results of a TOEFL or an IELTS or a Cambridge test of English proficiency when you apply. And you will need to meet the minimum scores that are described on our website. So just headline numbers, TOEFL, that's 110, and in IELTS, overall 7.5, with at least 7 in each component. So if anyone's listening out there and your degree was taught entirely in English, you don't need to take a test. That's the good news. But listen up, because we will potentially need some evidence from you that that was the case. It could be that you studied somewhere like the USA or Australia or the UK, in which case clearly you were taught in English, and we'll be able to see from your qualification transcript that that was the case. It could be that you studied in a country that isn't English majority speaking. Let's say you studied in India, for example. So it's not, as far as the UK government is concerned, English majority speaking, but your degree was taught entirely in English. You may find that your degree transcript itself literally states the medium of instruction, in which case, brilliant, upload that as evidence in the English language section of your application form. If your transcript doesn't show the medium of instruction, talk to your university. They will very quickly and very easily be able to supply you with a template letter that confirms who you are, what you studied, when you studied it, and they will make a declaration that your degree was taught and examined entirely in English. So really easy to obtain, very common request. Get hold of that letter, scan it, and upload it to your application. Clearly, if you are a national of a majority English-speaking country, this part of the application just doesn't apply to you at all. So this is really directed at people that might be listening from a non-majority English-speaking country. Let's say, though, for example, you are a German candidate and you studied in Germany and your degree was taught in German. I'm afraid you will need to submit the results of a TOEFL, IELTS or Cambridge test of English proficiency. It will need to meet our minimum threshold, and the test has to have been taken within the last 2 years. But as I say, there's a lot more information about that available online. So delve into the frequently asked questions and the English test part of our website for further information on that aspect. In terms of professional experience, we really welcome students to the class from many different walks of life. The MBA that we teach here at Oxford, it's really super broad-based. It is very much a general management MBA, and sure, you can pick your own pathway through the syllabus by choosing certain electives, but in terms of core courses and core curriculum, it really does equip you with business fundamentals across the piece. It's not a specialist MBA. So consequently, you will find yourself sharing the classroom with people from all kinds of backgrounds. Yeah, sure, some of those are going to be fairly traditional MBA type careers. You know, might be working in management consulting or strategy consulting at the moment, or maybe a career in finance, something of this nature. You might be running your own business. You might be being groomed to take control of your family business. You might be working in public policy or local government, or doing something really creative in the arts. You might be preparing for your first civilian role after leaving military service. You might be a medic. So really any and all of the above and more. No matter what your professional background, you are welcome to make an application to this programme as long as you have sufficient experience. And that's why we really seek a minimum of at least 2 years full-time paid work that you've gained since you left university. This is not a master's degree that you can proceed on to straight after an undergraduate degree. It's not just about coming here to acquire more theoretical knowledge and being able to apply that. We really want you to come not only to acquire that knowledge, but to come equipped with real stories from the front line. You need to be able to sit in class and reflect upon that project that you led, or that team that you manage, or that person that you've mentored or coached, or the time when you were putting together that business plan, or the time when you were trying to affect change in your team and it didn't quite go to plan, or that client meeting that was really illuminating. So in other words, you need to come with some professional and some life experience. So at least 2 years is what we look for ideally. And as you'll remember from that previous slide, the majority of the class here tends to complete the programme when they've got sort of 5 to 6 years experience under their belt. We ask you to upload a one-page CV as part of your application. So this again might be the time for you to finesse that a little bit. There is a template available on our website and on the application system. You're not obliged to use it, but if you are struggling to condense your CV or resume down to just one slide, have a look at the template, because it will show you what we think are the sort of salient information points to populate that CV with. The next thing to mention on this slide is references. We ask for you to have 2 referees in support of your application. Vast majority of candidates to business school are likely to have professional references rather than academic, purely because you've probably been out of academia quite a while, and unless you've really kept in touch with one of your teachers from university and perhaps they're still a mentor to you and are deeply involved in your professional life, they probably can't really speak to your strength and suitability for the programme or reflect on some real life work examples to support any comments that they might be providing. So you may find that professional referees are going to be more appropriate. This might be literally your line manager or a superior at work who knows you and your work very well. It could be a peer. It could be perhaps a previous employer. It could even be a client. So if there's someone that you've delivered quite a lot of work to, they know you, they know what makes you tick, you've worked together very closely, then you could certainly consider asking a client to act as one of your referees. We ask you to register both of your referees when you start your application. It's one of those good things to get squared away quite early on in the process, because then while you are busy completing the rest of your application form, your referees can be working away, answering a few questions, rating your competence against a few different behaviours, and uploading a letter of recommendation that will tell us a little bit more about how they know you, the kind of relationship you had, perhaps commenting on your strengths and weaknesses, maybe giving us a few real life examples to support some of those statements. But either way, those references need to be in and submitted when the deadline falls. So that's not under your direct control. So I'd encourage you to reach out to your referees, let them know when the deadline is, let them know it's really important that they submit by the time that deadline passes, or your application is going to remain incomplete. Supporting statement. We ask you to write just one essay these days, and it's really short. It's only 250 words, and you can use it in whichever way you wish. And the question is this: what else do you want the admissions committee to know about you that isn't covered elsewhere in your application? So the floor is yours. What would you like the committee to know about you? Well, you might want to I don't know, tell the committee about something that you enjoy to do when you're not at work. You may find that, you know, the application has been very sort of professionally focused, but actually something really interesting about you that maybe makes you different to some other candidates is something that you like to do in your spare time. Now, that could be anything from sport to work that you undertake in a voluntary capacity, but it might just shed a little bit more light upon you as an individual and show us maybe what your values are, what you're interested in, what makes you tick. You might want to tell us a little bit about your backstory. You might even want to use this supporting statement to show us that you are aware that maybe one aspect of your application profile is a little weaker than ideal. For example, when you were at university, you didn't do academically as well as you could because you were, I don't know, rowing for your university. There's a classic. You spent too much time on the water, maybe not enough time in class, therefore your grades suffered a little bit. But, you know, that was 6 years ago. And now you have all this great work experience. You have a really super strong standardized test score that gives us a much better insight into your true ability. So you might want to speak to something like that in your supporting statement, something that shows real self-awareness, for example. Either way, though, it is quite a short statement. So I said that I'd speak a little bit more about the video assessment, and I will. So once you submit your application, so you've uploaded your documents, you've populated your application with all kinds of information about you and your background, you then hit submit, and on the page that you land on next, which incidentally is the page where you also upload your transcripts and your GMAT or GRE score report, you will see a link to our video assessment platform. Now, this is an activity you need to undertake before the application deadline passes. So, top tip, if you submit a good few days before the application deadline, maybe even up to a week before the application deadline, that gives you plenty of time to get your video assessment done and completed. So once you click that link, you'll land on the platform where you can register. The next thing that will happen is that you will get to play around with the platform and see how it works. Basically, it's a way that you can video some answers to a question against the clock. So you are submitting video pieces. You will need to get used to seeing yourself on film, hearing yourself. We have created a bunch of practice questions that we will never, ever see you do. So you can practice with the platform, and you can feel like you're making a fool of yourself, and you can have a laugh and not get your words out. It doesn't matter. You can do that over and over and over until you feel really confident with the way that the technology works. It's super simple. Just use your laptop webcam, your inbuilt microphone. It's all perfectly sufficient. It's an incredibly robust platform as well, works really well all over the world, doesn't require massive amounts of bandwidth. But there'll come a point where you think, right, okay, I think I've got the hang of this technology and now I'm going to go for it. When you go for it, you will be asked 5 questions and you must answer all 5. The first 4 questions are video based, and the way it works is this. You will see question number 1, you will see it on the screen, and you will watch one of us asking the question. So you'll see one of us doing a little video, posing a question to you. You'll also be able to read the question. You then have a limited period of time, usually just a minute and a half or a couple of minutes, to have a think about that question. Think about your answer, gather yourself, and then you will give your answer to camera, and that will be saved. And you speak for about a minute and a half. So there's 4 of those video-based questions. 2 of them are very much around your motivation for wanting to do an MBA. So none of those questions should be surprising to you. You should be able to guess what they are if you're applying to business school. And you should be able to answer those really quite easily. They should come tripping off the tongue. The other 2 questions are randomized and they're more competency based. So the questions are likely to paint a scenario for you and ask you how you would react, or indeed how you did react if this ever happened to you in real life. Quite classic workplace type scenarios. So again, nothing wildly challenging, but really the purpose of these questions is to show us how you think on your feet, a little bit like the way you would in an interview scenario. So this certainly doesn't replace the interview at all, but the kind of question scenario is similar. So it's a, tell me about a time when this happened to you. What happened? Why did you do that? That type of question. You'll have a couple of minutes to reflect. You then record your piece to camera for about a minute and a half. And the 5th question is a short piece of writing. So you will read a question and you will then type your response against the clock. And again, this is not looking for an ideal answer. This is quite a few of these questions are quite wild and wacky. Actually, some of them are more sensible than others, but it's really just designed to show us how you write on your feet as opposed to speak on your feet. So something just off the cuff, just to show us that you can write against the clock in English and that flows sensibly. So that piece will then be submitted. Once it's done, it's done. You can't reshoot, you can't retake. But again, don't worry too much. It is, again, like the GMAT, just one part of your overall application. Okay, so how can you strengthen your profile? I'll just spin you around this wheel. It doesn't really matter where we start here, but I'm going to start at career vision. Your career vision is a pretty important part of the application from my perspective, because you're wanting an MBA for a reason, and that reason is likely to be largely founded upon what an MBA can do for your personal career. You're coming to a 1-year program, it's super intense. You're not going to have a whole bunch of spare time to sit back and ponder what you might want out of your professional future. You really need to do a lot of that pondering now. You need to know what it is we offer here at Oxford. You need to be able to convince us that you have a pretty good vision of where you see yourself professionally in the future. And you also need to be able to convince us that you have a reasonable chance of achieving that outcome. It's not our job to get you that job, it's our job to support you in that endeavour. And we absolutely will, providing that that is a really realistic challenge. Yes, of course, it's great to have a stretching goal, but it does need to be grounded in reality. So here we're talking about the career development section of the online application form that gets you to tell us what it is you would like to do after the MBA and to unpack that a little bit for us. Bit of a reflective exercise. Perhaps you will talk to us about why you feel you're in a great position to make that switch in your career. Perhaps you'll explore for us who in your network has done something similar. Maybe you have spoken to an alum from the program who's given you some great advice. Maybe you have done some research into some prospective employers and you know their hiring practices and you know the kind of skills and talent and background they look for, and you can convince us that you think you measure up really well against that criteria. So having that career vision from the get-go is really important. And sure, once you're here, things might change. You might change your mind a little bit or refocus that to a degree, but you do need to have a pretty strong and well thought through career plan when you apply. And if that doesn't go to plan, having a decent plan B up your sleeve is also sensible. And you'll find that the career development section will ask you also to tell us a little bit more about that. Which leads us on quite nicely to awareness. You need to be self-aware, you need to be realistic, you need to understand yourself, know yourself. Now, we spoke briefly about that in terms of the essay piece. If part of your profile is slightly weak, it's good to be aware of that and be able to tell us that you're aware, you're doing something about it, you're fixing it. Really, your whole application should show us that you are pretty well tuned into who you are, what you want, and that you know yourself pretty well. Your application should also look for opportunities to demonstrate to us your leadership, either leadership skills, but you're not necessarily all going to be managers already when you apply. So think about your leadership potential. This could be something that's very work related. It could be something that you do in your spare time that really shows us that you have leadership potential, and you can explore and exploit that in your application, perhaps through your career plan, perhaps through describing your current role for us, which you're also asked to do, perhaps in your video submissions, which leads us on really nicely to communication. Clearly, a lot of your application form it's pretty flat. It's just words on a page. But paint a picture for us as well. Really get those words to come alive, help us understand the person behind the application. And of course, your video assessment really gives you the opportunity to communicate with us in terms of your verbal skills, your presence, really communicate to us with confidence. So practice and practice, really get used to that whole submission platform. So when you do your live take, you feel that again, you are giving it your best shot. And last but not least, teamwork. Teamwork is a massively important aspect of the MBA. When you come here, sure, in many ways you are doing so for selfish reasons. You want the next step in your personal career journey. You want to come and acquire knowledge. You want to come and expand your network, but you're also coming here to give of yourself and think about how you can demonstrate teamwork in your application also. So again, think about the examples, think about the essay, think about when you are reflecting on your current role, what can you tell us about your ability to work across teams? So what might you want to do next? Here are some sensible next steps. You're all on different parts of the pathway. So some of you, it's really early days. So for you, I would say download a course brochure from our website. In so doing, you can give us permission to keep communicating with you and inviting you to other events like this webinar. You might then end up coming along to, I see another suggestion on the list here is to come to an open day or something like that. You can plan a visit to the school and connect with the recruitment team. Certainly, you can connect with current students and alum. Do that through LinkedIn. That's a great way of connecting with other people from Oxford Said. And prepare for your standardised tests. For some of you, this means that you're thinking about starting your application. And for others, it means that you are thinking about submitting your application. But that's enough of me talking on and on this afternoon. What I am going to do now is give my voice a rest and also give you a rest from hearing my voice and hand over to my colleague Gisela Collins, who is going to take you through some of the questions that you've been asking during the broadcast and give you a few tips and pointers. So Gisela, over to you.
Okay, thank you. We'll just scroll back up. Okay, I'm just quickly reading because some of them have already been covered. Okay. So someone has asked that if your GRE score is below 160 and a quant of 161, should you still apply in November, or do you recommend retaking? Obviously, that would depend on exactly how below 160 and 161 it is. You know, in the same way that we have an average GMAT score of, you know, say 650 and above, we would say is competitive. If you've got a 640 or a 630, then absolutely yes, you can still apply, because we do take the whole application into consideration. And if you've got good work experience and a strong GPA, then that's going to balance out a slightly lower GMAT. That would be the same with the GRE. However, if you've got a very low GRE, I would say what, 148, 149, something like that, we would definitely advise you to resit it. Okay, someone has asked, do we need to submit semester-wise mark sheets? Yeah, we do want to see your full mark sheets. So we do want to see everything that you've been graded for throughout your undergraduate or graduate degree, not just your degree certificate. We want to see every semester. So yes, we would expect you to scan and upload all of those, even if it may go across 10 or 12 pages. That's absolutely fine. Someone has asked, if I apply in stage 3 but don't make it through, can I apply at stage 1 when the next cycle opens? Yes, you can. You can't apply within the same application year, but you are welcome to apply within any stage of the following year. Okay, someone is asking or saying that their undergraduate degree is not as good as their master's. Would you look at the master's transcript instead? No, we wouldn't look at them instead. We would look at them as well as. So we would want you to upload both. We need to see your undergraduate degree and your master's degree. And if you have improved dramatically between the two, we would take that into consideration when we're looking at your whole application. Someone has said if they have their GMAT report, but they haven't requested Pearson's to send the score to Oxford, please do. We can process your application with your unofficial score, but should you be invited for interview, we do need your official score at that point. So it makes sense for you to do it earlier rather than later. You know, it's not difficult. Usually as soon as you contact Pearson's, we can see it within 24 hours. So I would recommend doing that, you know, sooner rather than later. Okay, that's an interesting one. So someone has said they studied middle school, high school, and an associate degree in the US, but their bachelor's was in Mexico. Do I still qualify to waive my English test? Unfortunately not, no. We don't consider schooling below a degree. You have to have taken a degree level qualification for 9 months or longer, and the whole course has to have been in English. So I'm afraid, no, you would still need to take an English language test for that.
Can I just pop in there, Gisela? Sorry. Just in case you're thinking, oh, but I did a whole year abroad during my degree. So let's say I was doing my degree in Germany, but I did 1 year in the UK. Can I have a waiver? No, you can't. As Gisela said, it needs to be the entire degree needs to have been taught in English. Sorry.
Okay. Someone has asked if there's a word limit for the career section. There isn't. We are looking for a fair amount of detail there, but get the balance right. The admissions committee don't have time to read War and Peace on every application. So we do look for an amount of detail, but we don't want endless pages and pages, to try and keep it clear and concise. Someone is asking about scholarships in round 3. Yes, there are still plenty of scholarships in round 3. Round 3, the January deadline, is actually the university's scholarship deadline. So if you are interested in applying for one of the university scholarships, that's their deadline anyway. So it's a good one to apply at. Obviously, some of the business school scholarships will have been awarded in stages 1 and 2, but there are still plenty available in stage 3. And someone else has asked, do I need to submit all the scholarship essays at the same stage? Yes, you do. You will find the essay prompts for the scholarships that need an essay on the application form, and you need to fill those out and submit them at the same time. Not all of the scholarships need an extra essay. It's usually a couple of the university ones that do, or SCOL, but you will see the essay prompts there. So we would recommend that you get those in at the same time. Okay, yeah. Someone has said here, do you think a social entrepreneur with an existing enterprise can use the optional essay to explain what will happen to the enterprise during their period of their MBA? Absolutely. You know, that is there just, you know, as it says, to share anything else with us that you might not have been able to state elsewhere on the application. So yes, you could definitely explain to us, you know, what it is that you've done and what you're planning to do with your company whilst you're studying. Please keep in mind that it is an incredibly intensive programme. You're not going to have the time to work and study. So it would be very sensible to set something robust in place to look after a company if you are running or managing your own company. You are not going to have the time to do that and study full-time for the MBA. Someone has asked about information for scholarships and how to apply for them. If you go to our website, if you scroll down the MBA page, there is a section there about called fees and funding, and there's a link that you can click on there which will take you through to the scholarship pages, and that does give you a lot more information about the different scholarships that are available and how to apply for them. And someone else has asked, for candidates without a business background, do you recommend to take a business fundamental course before the MBA programme starts? That is entirely down to the individual, how much time you might have and whether you feel you need it. I do know that a lot of students who might not come from a financial background or have done any finance for a while or at all, do some pre-MBA study. You will start hearing from us from about the end of May, beginning of June, and we'll start, if you've made an offer to the programme, and we will start sending you out bits and pieces of information, pre-course reading and things that you need to do. So there will be some advice that comes through to you there on things that might be useful to you to do before September and the programme starts. Do we accept candidates who are already 35 plus years old? Well, the thing to bear in mind there is that most people who are over 35 are at a very different place in their career. You might well be far more suited to our executive MBA programme rather than the full-time MBA programme. However, we do accept, you know, there is in theory no age limit on the MBA programme, but you would need to make it very clear why you were wanting to pursue a full-time MBA at this point in your career, because that's something that the admissions committee would query when they looked at your application. A lot of people seem to be asking about word counts. So a couple of people here have asked about the post-MBA career plan section and what the word count is. As I said earlier, there isn't a word count as such. We are looking for a fairly clear, concise sort of description, but you know, we do need a bit of detail there as well. Okay, so someone's asking about the links for uploading the transcripts in GMAT. They will appear when you hit submit. So as soon as you feel your application is complete and you hit submit, it will then ask you to upload documents before it can completely go through and be submitted. Okay, can we provide any additional insight on how students tackle the open-ended essay question? Not really, because it is an open-ended essay question. There's no wrong answer, there's no right answer. It's entirely down to the individual and what you want to tell us. We've had everything from, you know, things that people do extracurricular, maybe you volunteer, maybe you love to travel. We even had someone telling us all about their cat. So really, you know, it's entirely up to you and what you feel you might want to say. We do advise that you write something. You know, some people will say no or not applicable because they think they've covered everything. That's not going to get you brownie points with the admissions committee. Write something. Tell us something about you. You know, even if it's just giving us an idea of you outside of work, outside of study, what you enjoy, what your interests are. Someone is asking about the alumni network in India. We have an extremely active alumni network in India. Oxford has something called the OBN, the Oxford Business Network, and they have chapters all over the world. And we have got several chapters in India. I would say our alumni are, you know, very active on LinkedIn, so that would be a place to check out and see if you can connect with somebody there. Someone has asked, can we retake more than once before submit the video assessment? You can practice as many times as you want, but once you decide you're going to record, then no, you can't retake it. You know, what you do then is what we will see. Okay, someone's asking about the free text box on the work experience section. Define your current role. Again, this box does not have a word limit on it, should I say, as such. And we want you to go into a bit more detail about your current role, because obviously of the one-page CV, you're not really going to be giving us enough detail there. And yes, you can go into detail about previous roles, especially if there's something that you're particularly proud of. You know, maybe there was a project that you led and or an award that you won. You know, we'd be very happy to see you go into some detail there. But again, as I say, we don't have time to read a novel, so don't be going into great lengths of detail. Try and keep that clear and concise. Okay, someone has said that is it right, they don't have to use the CV template? Yes, that's absolutely right. That template is just there as a bit of a prompt to give you an idea of how to condense your CV down into one page and what it might be that we would be looking for. You can use any kind of CV template you want, just as long as it is one page. Okay, for the job experience section, someone has asked about the number of years of experience. We are looking for the number of years of experience to the day you will submit your application, not to the day that the programme starts. So if we're asking you to have a minimum of 2 years full-time experience, that needs to be to the date that you submit your application. Someone is asking about the English language certificate and whether they can provide it late. I would suggest you get onto your college now if it's going to take them a week to provide that. A lot of colleges might say that, but certainly in countries like India, where they're very used to this request, they actually turn them around really quickly and usually provide them within 24 or 48 hours. They have a standard template that they can issue to you on request, and it's literally just a case of putting your details into it and then uploading it to an email and sending it to you. Okay, so we have got time for one more question. Let's have a look. Can an above average GMAT score balance a lower undergraduate GPA? Absolutely, yes. No one part of your application is more important than the other. So we do take that into consideration. And yes, if somebody has got a lower GPA, but they've got great work experience and a stellar GMAT score, then that can definitely balance out that lower GPA score.
Thank you very much, Gisela. We have exhausted our time together. We've tried to exhaust Gisela with lots of really, really good questions. I hope everyone found those answers really useful. A lot of very classic scenarios, so I hope that was helpful to everybody. All that it really remains for us to say is A, good luck with your applications, but B, do please let us know if we can help you further. You will receive a link to a recording of this afternoon's session, so then you'll have our email address, and do please drop us a line if you want to have a sort of a one-to-one chat. Just drop us an email, ask us a question, and we'll do our very best to get back to you and give you some good guidance to help you put your application together. But for now, it just remains for me to say good luck and thanks so much for listening into our webinar this afternoon. Thanks very much. Goodbye.